for the 2016 Signum University Annual Fund campaign. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. So good to see so many of you here tonight. I just love, especially at events like this. I mean, it's cool enough at regular classes or Mythgard Academy classes or something, but at an event like this, which kind of draws people from all different areas of things that we do and stuff that we're involved in. It's always really neat to see the list of names of people all gathered here together. So thanks again for joining me here tonight. Uh, Happy Hobbit Day, by the way. We have for the last couple of years now been kicking off our campaign on Hobbit Day because it seems like a great time to get together. And I'm always, of course, when I think of Bilbo and Frodo's birthday, I always think of the party, and that always makes me think of, Bilbo standing in front and saying, "I have an announcement." So it always seems like the fit day for announcements, right? Anyway, so I wanted to start tonight by showing you a little video that we made. It's one of the things that I'm doing this year because this is a big year, right? This is the 5th year anniversary of Signum University. We're not 11D1, but we're 5 years old today, which in online university years is pretty cool. Feels pretty close to 11D1 actually. And of course, it's been prompting me. Thinking back on that has been prompting me to get all retrospective lately, which I've been doing a lot of. Exactly, Erica and Neil. We're kindergartners now. That's a huge deal, right? Our school has grown up enough to head off to school. Anyway, so with the help of my wonderful media team led by Sarah Powell, I've made up a little video to just as a kind of an introduction and a look back and kind of an overview of sort of who we are and where we've come from here. So let me play that for you.
My name is Corey Olsen, known to many as the Tolkien Professor, and I am the president of Signum University. Although it seems hard to believe, it has now been 5 years since I started my experiment in online education, an experiment that has now grown into something truly
I love that picture.
When I began what was originally the Mythgard Institute, my first goal was to build an online center that would encourage and facilitate the study of the works of J.R.R. Tolkien and other imaginative works. I knew from my experience with my podcast that there were thousands of people out there who had longed for the chance to study Tolkien, fantasy, and science fiction with academic seriousness, but who had been thwarted in one way or another. For some, it was that their colleges had been too narrow-minded to treat fantasy literature as a real subject. For others, their career paths had simply taken them in a different direction, until it seemed that the chance to take Tolkien classes was now itself only a fantasy. Mythgard changed all that, and our approach to interactive online classes has enabled thousands of students over the years to learn what they love in a whole new way. But it was immediately clear that this online institution I had formed could accomplish even more. Our innovative approach to online education, the first of its kind in the world, clearly had the potential to make a big impact on the world of higher education. By dedicating ourselves to a teaching model that uses the internet to maximize rather than to minimize the contact between teacher and student, we were building an educational model that gives our students the ability to immerse themselves in an intensive academic environment that completely ignores geography. Moreover, by not having any kind of physical campus, we eliminated the majority of the costs which drive tuition into the stratosphere for most schools. I found that we had created an academic institution that could make great education both more accessible and more affordable than it has been in a long time. With this vision in mind, I founded Signum University, the official home of our master's degree in language and literature. Today, we've come a long way. Signum University is now well established, with graduates earning PhDs and students being published and esteemed in the scholarly community. The Mythgard Institute, which is housed within Signum, is still a thriving center for academic exploration in Tolkien studies and related fields, and it has enriched the lives of many. Even other universities have begun to pay attention and to seek our advice in developing their own online programs. Signum continues to make a difference, but we need your help. Signum has never received and will never apply for government funding. Everything we have done has been accomplished only through the support of our students and friends. I hope you will consider giving to the Signum Annual Fund this year and helping us to continue to realize the Signum vision.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much to Sarah for putting that together. So it's been a crazy ride, and I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit more. But first, and how funny was that picture of me wearing a tie? I had totally forgotten that I used to wear ties back in the day. Back in the day. But I wanted to start. It is, of course, Bilbo and Frodo's birthday, and it seems best and most fitting to start that with to start off with a little madam, right? I want to read to you guys for a little bit. It's my little gift, my little birthday gift to begin with here. I want to read a passage. I was like, okay, I want to read a passage from the Lord of the Rings. What passage should I read? And I wasn't really sure what passage I wanted to read. And then for some reason, this is the passage that popped into my head, and I didn't figure out why this passage popped into my head for a while. But this is the one that clearly I wanted to read. Well, said Gandalf at last, what are you thinking about? Have you decided what to do? This, of course, is in Chapter 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring, Shadow of the Past. No, answered Frodo, coming back to himself out of darkness, and finding to his surprise that it was not dark, and that out of the window he could see the sunlit garden. Or perhaps, yes. As far as I understand what you have said, I suppose I must keep the ring and guard it, at least for the present, whatever it may do to me. Whatever it may do, it will be slow to evil if you keep it with that purpose, said Gandalf. I hope so, said Frodo. I hope that you may find some other better keeper soon. But in the meanwhile, it seems that I am a danger to all that live near me. I cannot keep the ring and stay here. I ought to leave Bag End, leave the Shire, leave everything and go away. He sighed. I should like to save the Shire if I could, though there have been times when I thought the inhabitants too stupid and dull for words, and have felt that an earthquake or an invasion of dragons might be good for them. But I don't feel like that now. I feel that as long as the Shire lies behind, safe and comfortable, I shall find wandering more bearable. I shall know that somewhere there is a firm foothold, even if my feet cannot stand there again. Of course, I have sometimes thought of going away, but I imagine that is a kind of holiday, a series of adventures like Bilbo's or better, ending in peace. But this would mean exile, a flight from danger into danger, drawing it after me. And I suppose I must go alone if I am to do that and save the Shire. But I feel very small. I feel very small and very uprooted and, well, desperate. The enemy is so strong and terrible. He did not tell Gandalf, but as he was speaking, a great desire to follow Bilbo flamed up in his heart, to follow Bilbo, and even perhaps to find him again. It was so strong that it overcame his fear. He could almost have run out there and then down the road without his hat, as Bilbo had done on a similar morning long ago. My dear Frodo, exclaimed Gandalf, hobbits really are amazing creatures, as I have said before. You can learn all there is to know about their ways in a month, and yet after 100 years they can still surprise you at a pinch. I hardly expected to get such an answer, not even from you. But Bilbo made no mistake in choosing his heir, though he little thought how important it would prove. I am afraid you are right. The ring will not be able to stay hidden in the Shire much longer, and for your own sake, as well as for others, you will have to go, and leave the name of Baggins behind you. That name will not be safe to have, outside the Shire or in the wild. I will give you a traveling name now. When you go as Mr. Underhill. But I don't think you need go alone. Not if you know of anyone you can trust, anyone who would be willing to go by your side, and that you would be willing to take into unknown perils. But if you look for a companion, be careful in choosing. All right. So, as I was thinking about this passage, as I said, I didn't really know why this passage popped in my head, but I couldn't get it out once it had. And I was really struck again by sort of the drift of Frodo's thoughts through this passage, right? I mean, notice where he starts with this. You know, Gandalf has just finished telling him the story of the ring and the business about Gollum and everything. So he now knows all the stuff, right? They've done the proof, right? the ring's been thrown into the fire. He's read the fiery letters. He knows this is the One Ring. Gandalf now has proven that this is the One Ring. He's heard the story of Gollum. He knows how the ring came to him and what happened to the ring originally and all that stuff, right? He knows everything. And Gandalf says to him, "So, have you decided what to do?" Which is kind of intense, actually. And Frodo's initial response seems like an admirable response, right? His response is, "Well, I suppose I must keep the ring and guard it, right? At least for the present, whatever it may do to me." And that's a big deal, right? You can see the sacrifice in there, right? The self-sacrifice in there. Like he recognizes from the beginning that it might be harmful, right? That this is not a safe thing that he has taken up to do, and yet he's willing to do it. And Gandalf himself doesn't oppose this, but he doesn't seem to be suggesting more, right? This seems to be kind of what Gandalf expected him to say, right? Whatever it may do, it'll be slow to evil if you keep it with that purpose, right? Like that's kind of what he was hoping and anticipating that Frodo would say. But Frodo goes on, right? After expressing the hope that Gandalf will find another better keeper, right? He doesn't think himself, sort of worthy of this or really the right person for the job. But he says that he realizes he ought to leave, right? In fact, his level of self-sacrifice then goes one step further as he realizes, no, actually, it's not just my job to keep the ring. My job is not only to do that. Actually, given the situation that I've been placed in, I need to do more, right? I should do the next thing, which is to leave the Shire and to keep evil from coming here in order to find it. And I love his, I should like to save the Shire if I could. I always like that line. Like, I guess like saving the Shire would be kind of cool, right? He doesn't go out with like heroism in his heart, right? He's not like I am determined. Yes, I shall save the Shire, right? That's not, and even in the act of expressing his willingness to sacrifice himself in order to save it, he is still criticizing it, right? The Shire and its inhabitants. Thinking that they seem too stupid and dull for words, right? And he thought an invasion of dragons might be good for them. But now notice where it starts to drift, right? It starts to drift into his own personal, he does have a new appreciation for the Shire, of course. I shouldn't skip that, right? Now he sees the Shire differently, right? He sees it as a firm foothold. He's got a new perspective on the Shire now that he's thinking about losing it, right? Even though he used to be bored there, like up to a couple days ago, he used to be bored there. But then notice where he then shifts from there, right? Instead of going in the direction of like, this is bigger and more scarier and more scary and oh my goodness, and sort of going into terror and ending up, well, like Bilbo was, right? Lying on the hearthrug, yelling, struck by lightning, struck by lightning. He doesn't go in that direction, right? Instead, what rises up within him is his own desire, right? He confesses his own desire for adventure, right? His desire to go away, his desire to have a kind of a Bilbo-esque adventure of his own, right? Though he says it was never really, when he pictured it, it was never like this, right? He expresses his fears, but he expresses, and then what he doesn't express is that really deep longing, right? The longing that, he keeps that to himself, that last paragraph, the one that begins with, he did not tell Gandalf, right? But as he's speaking, this desire wells up within him, this desire to run out and down the road without his hat, just like Bilbo did, right? And again, the sort of the trend, as I say, it's the trajectory of Frodo's thoughts that I find so striking. Instead of just having his, and this is, I think, just a wonderful illustration of Tolkien's, so both his, insight into people, his insight into stories, and into myth and heroism, basically. He could have been a simple hero story, right? He could have just had Frodo stand up and be a hero. Or even like, a reluctant or an accidental hero or something, kind of like Bilbo was a little bit more, but he's not. He's not just Bilbo over again, right? We see him rising to the occasion, but it's not simple, right? His own his own fears and desires are all tangled up together. His willingness to sacrifice himself, but his reluctance to put himself forward, his desire to have an adventure but not to be a hero, right? It's this sort of really complicated but really endearing, I think, anyway, very moving tangle of emotions that Frodo finds himself wrapped up in, and then Gandalf's marveling at the end, right? Um, yeah. So after I chose this passage to read to you guys, and I was thinking about it, I thought about it for a few minutes before I suddenly realized. I was like, wait a second. Oh, wait, I know why I chose this passage, right? I chose this passage because of all the stuff that I've been thinking about. In fact, because of the, well, really because of the personal relevance that it has to me and to this whole situation, this whole Signum situation that I've been thinking about. Um, and I almost didn't talk about that. I was just going like, well, maybe I just talk about the passage and then we can kind of move on from there because it's what I do, right? I'm a teacher. In fact, if anything, I mean, you guys know from being in classes with me that I tend not that I always resist. I don't always refuse, but I resist. Talking about Tolkien's life and sort of projecting on his biography and stuff. But if there's one thing that I dislike even more than that, it's sort of the merely personal reflection. It's not that I dislike it. I mean, there's definitely a place for it. But I've never felt like that place was in the classroom, right? We don't, I've always, it was honestly, to me, it was the thing that made the difference when I was when I was in middle school and the first couple years of high school. I hated English class, hated it, because all I ever got in English class was that kind of like, how do you relate to this story? And like, what does it mean to you? And I was just like, I don't care, man. Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, and this conversation is boring me terribly, and I don't want to know about your life, right? Like, anyway, that was my response. It was the moment that that I had a teacher who put all that aside, and instead of trying to make it relevant to our lives, showed me how to do like hard-hitting inductive analysis of a text and showed how you can find themes and patterns and things and what it draws out of it, that I was like, wow, that was my life-changing experience. That turned me from somebody who really liked my math and science classes quite a bit better than my English classes into a future English professor. But nevertheless, when merely sharing a passage with friends on Hobbit Day, it seems like not an inappropriate moment to sort of confess the personal meaning that this passage has come to have for me, and the way that I have really sort of connected this passage to myself. I think really kind of subconsciously before this moment, that it really, to me, kind of maps onto the as I said, onto my Signum choice. The direction it moved is a little bit different, right? Frodo goes from this sort of sense of responsibility and deepening responsibility into awakening desire. With me, it kind of worked the other way around, right? Mine kind of started with desire and enthusiasm, and I did run out the door without my hat, and then was like, wait. Hang on, wait a second. Where am I, and what's going on? So again, the direction didn't quite didn't work out in the same order that it does for Frodo, and yet I find I'm not gonna I'm not going to sit here and lecture on the details of its personal relevance, but I think you'll see as I go on to talk a little bit more about the Signum story. Because I want to do that. I want to talk about how we got here and where we are. This is our fall fundraising campaign, is when we really look at Signum and celebrate what's going on with Signum. I want to share with you where we are, where we're going. But of course, it's the 5th anniversary. I want to look back at where we've been. So I want to give a little background. I know that many of you know this, know the Signum story, but there's a lot that I kind of want to put together for people, and not all of you, and I don't assume that everybody, of course, knows the whole story. This makes me feel like Thorin in chapter 1, right? When he's telling the whole story, right? When he's going to tell the story of the sack of Erebor, and acknowledges, by the way, that he thinks that his own nephews, Fili and Kili, probably don't know the whole story, right? He thinks he's right in naming Fili and Kili as those who don't understand. Um, by the way, so as you can see, I'm a total sentimentalist at heart when it comes to it, right? Like I tend to think in, Tolkien scenes and Tolkien lines. Um, but uh, anyway, yeah. Uh, so let's go back over this a little bit. Um, an exchange I was having with Matt Gooding on Twitter today reminded me of the moment when I first announced Mythgard and the formation of the Mythgard Institute. I did that from my. I did have my laptop. It wasn't from my phone. It was from my laptop on Facebook in the airport in Albuquerque as I was about to fly home from MythCon, I believe, from the Mythbeak Society that year, and announced that I was starting Mythgard and we were opening up in the fall. And that my headline of my Facebook post. I know there are many of you here tonight who probably remember that Facebook post that I made back in. It was the very end of July. Maybe it was like August 1st. It was right around there, end of July, beginning of August, in 2011. Um, and anyway, my headline for my post was "The day has come," right? And of course, it was sort of a sort of a Huron reference, but notice even the sort of the implications of that, right? Like it was an anticipated thing. This is not like, hey, I'm doing something wild and insane, right? That wasn't my lead-in. Instead, it was like, hey, this is the next thing is here, right? That was totally how I thought of it. When I started Mythgard, it was totally an extension of my podcast. I had been already doing the Tolkien Professor for 4 years at that point. Tolkien Professor podcast has now been running for 9 years, which seems really crazy. But I mean, it all started with, my love for Tolkien and my excitement about sharing things with you guys and with all the listeners I'd had over the years, the enthusiasm of the listeners and responding to it, the response from many of my listeners, some of whom are still here with me this evening, wanting more, wanting interactive classes, wishing they could dig even deeper into the books and really basically kind of fill a void that had been there in their lives. The opportunity to really study this stuff with academic seriousness, and that was what I was doing when I started Mythgard. Now, the first step in the basic vision of Mythgard and what came to be Signum was about the educational interface. That was the thing, right? That was the thing that marked the transition from the Tolkien Professor podcast into the Mythgard Institute. And ultimately, it was the Silmarillion Seminar that did it. The Silmarillion Seminar was the first time I ever experimented with, hey, let's take a web conferencing interface and see if we can just do a discussion class that way. Do a live classroom thing. My expectations were super low when I did it. It was totally experimental. And yeah, Luke is pointing out he had just graduated from high school when I started the Tolkien Professor podcast. Yeah, I know. Exactly, right? Doesn't it seem like forever ago? Yeah, so the Silmarillion Seminar totally blew my mind. The Silmarillion Seminar totally changed my world, because as a teacher, I'm sitting there and saying, I was completely blown away. I was like, wow, this works. This is incredible. I never had any idea that this would work in this way, that you could take this, newfangled online, interaction medium and do something, not just to have like a two-way conversation, but to really have a classroom discussion that was as good as anything I had ever had before. I mean, the Silmarillion Seminar is still to this day one of the greatest classroom environments I've ever had, one of the greatest like the best class chemistry of any educational endeavor I've ever done. Now, remember the state of online education in 2011, right? It was still pretty new, and it was kind of out there, but people were pretty skeptical about it back then, right? I mean, it was the big challenge in 2011 when I said I was going to do this. Everybody started looking at me like, "Isn't online education like a racket?" I mean, everybody was sort of assumed that online education was, you know, like something, well, not exactly criminal, but not legit anyway. Like it was probably a swindle, right? You had to prove to people like, no, we're actually educators, right? We're not just here to try to cheat you out of your money. Of course, our low tuition rates, if we were thieves, we were fairly unambitious thieves, I suppose. But perhaps that helped to allay fears. But anyway, it was definitely a new thing, and nobody was doing this. Nobody, and that's what I noticed. I looked around and I was like, wow, nobody's doing this. This is amazing. This works. Somebody should be doing this, right? This is a thing. And it wouldn't have to cost all that much, right? Because we don't have to have a campus. We have no costs other than, this is pretty cheap. So let's do this, and let's set a really low tuition, and let's make this happen. It was like the perfect next step from my podcast, right? Hey, no, we're upgrading now. We've got interactive classes. It's like a real, collegiate environment. This is fantastic. But of course, I was still thinking mostly about Tolkien studies and wanting to create that center for Tolkien studies and fantasy and science fiction literature studies, knowing that a lot of people didn't have that kind of opportunity when they were in school, or just wanted to dig deeper and didn't have the chance. And so it was still really all about that. But the wider implications weren't really long in occurring to me, though, even as I was planning that first semester, and as that very first semester, fall of 2011, was beginning, the implications were really kind of beginning to become clear. I mean, I'd already noticed it doesn't cost that much to offer classes this way, right? But the more I'm looking at it, I was like, yeah, this doesn't cost much at all, right? And that's kind of a big deal nowadays, right? The whole student debt issue is one that was always very personal to me. I am up. I was always, when I was in college, I was a poor kid who was attending a very expensive school, and I was like totally. I was one of the charity cases. My school, like, there were always a few like smart poor kids that were kind of taken in and given like a pretty big chunk of financial aid and stuff, and I knew several other of the poor kids at the school, and we were pretty much under the impression that this was like it was like a reputation thing, that they like to be able to say that they took in the poor kid, that they weren't just a rich kid school, right? Only like 90% were the rich kids, but the other 10% were also totally poor. So that was me. I was one of those. But for the grace of God, I would have graduated from there with enormous student debt. I didn't. I graduated with a bunch, but not a totally life devastating amount of student debt. But then afterwards, when I was on the other side, when I was teaching, I was watching my students graduate year after year, my poor English majors graduate year after year, with, $80,000-$100,000 of debt. It was just heartbreaking to watch. Again, because I knew that. I mean, I've never looked at the world from the perspective of, a rich person. I've always been pretty far outside the 1%, and I've always found that very moving, and it bothered me. So I was pretty quick to be sensitive to the fact that, hey, you know what? This thing that I'm doing, this Mythgard thing that I've started up, there's some real potential here. This could actually make a difference for a lot of people, because you see, it seemed to me at the time, and it still seems to me, that in order to change the situation, I knew from working at a school that it wasn't as, solving the student debt problem was not as easy as just saying, you just need to cut tuition prices. They're too high. Make them lower. They can't cut tuition prices. I mean, every year I saw the budget of the school where I was, and although the tuition was very high, they were not exactly rolling in extra money every year because their costs are really high. Maintaining a campus is ridiculously expensive. And So anyway, it's, they can't cut tuition. They can't afford to cut tuition. At that time also, by the way, remember 2011, late in 2011. So we were in presidential primary series, right, in Obama's second election at that point. Um, and it was a major talking point. The student debt issue was a major talking point, as I recall, especially among the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidates, rather, at that time. And and so I'm kind of looking around. Everyone's talking about, on the news, everyone's talking about student debt. We've got to find a way to solve this problem. And I'm like, actually, I have an idea, right? I think I've kind of hit on something here that looks like it really might work. And I was still new enough that I was like, it's not exactly like I'm going to go call up 60 Minutes and tell them I found the answer. But again, I'm listening to the presidential candidates make kind of ridiculous promises, right? I think we can cut college tuition down to $5,000 a year. And I'm looking and I'm like, no, that's not reasonable. I mean, like maybe with huge government subsidies, but schools can't do that. But I could, actually. Yeah, I could do that. That would that would totally work with this system. And that's when sort of things really changed. That's when sort of so this is when, again, sort of taking that next step, like we see Frodo taking, one step after another in his own thought and his own kind of taking responsibility of the situation in that passage. That sense of responsibility was kind of growing on me. I was like, I have this idea. I think this could really make a difference, because what I think is that people need an alternative. People don't want to go into debt. Why do they go into debt? Why are people still graduating with $100,000 in debt? Because it's better than the alternative. That is, of not having a degree, or of just trying to cobble something together, from community colleges and stuff. Basically, things where you're not going to really be able to compete with your peers who have gone into debt, right, and gotten the more expensive degree. But there's no viable alternative. There's no option that enables you to get a really good education while still not going into debt, right? And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this could be that thing. This really looks like it could be it. And I was in a place where I've never been in my life, where I was like, okay, like I've had fun ideas before, right? I mean, like my podcast was a fun idea that panned out, right? And it was very exciting, and I was having a good time. And by that time, I was already, I was already working on my book. I was well into writing my book by that time. In fact, the manuscript, I had to hand in the draft manuscript of my Hobbit book by New Year's Eve of that year of 2011. And for those of you who know me can guess when I handed it in. In fact, when the timestamp on that email to the editor at Hood Mifflin, 11:55 p.m. on New Year's Eve, I made my deadline. But anyway, so like lots of things were kind of, I'd had ideas that panned out, and it was that was fun. But this was different, right? This was a totally different thing. But this was my motivation. This was the motivation that led me to make the leap. And so instead of just sticking with the Mythgard Institute, I founded Signum University because I was beginning to think towards the future. It's like, no, okay, I still want to do the Mythgard thing, and I am doing, and we've remained doing the Mythgard thing, but I wanted not just this sort of niche institute that I had founded. I wanted something that would be able to be, because I was beginning to think bigger into these broader educational issues, right? And wanting to build something instead, which could be, the cornerstone of a much larger and a much broader thing that could impact the lives of even more people. This was the point at which this ceased to be a hobby. It ceased to be a sidelight. It was no there and back again journey anymore, and it was. This is this was the choice that led directly after a little bit more time, which was kind of awkward in moments, which led to my leaving my tenure job. I had tenure at my institution, and I left that job in order to dedicate my time to Signum full time. I said, no no there and back again journey at that point. Um, but that still wasn't it. What happened over the next few years was really cool. Something happened that I never anticipated. That is, I began to find something that I was doing something that I hadn't even thought about, hadn't even planned, hadn't anticipated at all. In the beginning, of course, as many of you will remember, Mythgard and Signum were running in like crazy startup mode. There was me and a couple other people, and we were doing everything. Right. I mean, it was just like there were only a very few people involved, and I was doing everything from planning and teaching the classes and the academic program to, doing the bookkeeping and, managing a bunch of the software and everything. I was just doing everything from top, from top to bottom. I was involved all over the place, and there were several people who were involved, including, of course, Ed Powell and Trish Lambert, who have been with me and working with me from the beginning, have been so helpful. For many years, and they will remember the wild and crazy startup days. But as the institution really began to grow and put down roots, I began to discover this other opportunity. And this is the thing that I had never really anticipated, and that is what it meant to be building a university from scratch, which is what we were doing. The real opportunity involved in building a university from scratch. At the beginning, I'd only really begun to see the implications of that and of what that meant and of the kind of opportunity that it was. Because higher education, well, it tends to be pretty dysfunctional, frankly. And any of you who have worked at an institution of higher education will know the kind of things that I'm talking about, right? I mean, you don't have to look very far around. And of course, I'm talking about American higher education here. If you're not an American, in your country, it's probably better. But here it's kind of messed up. And, you look around, you just look around higher education, you see these ridiculously inflated administrative salaries, presidents and deans making ludicrous amounts of money, totally out of proportion with the rest of the institution, creating this really weird divide between the sort of theoretical leadership, I put that in air quotes, of the institution, and then the people who are actually doing the work, right, like the staff and the faculty. The routine exploitation of sorry, Malcolm Harden says no. It's equally dysfunctional in other countries, at least in the UK. Right? I get that. Yeah. Anyway, so the routine exploitation of faculty, which drove me crazy, watching that happen as I was coming up as a grad student and as early in my faculty days, seeing with the glut of PhDs that had been created by this really horrible cycle, right, of how universities decide, hey, we can use our graduate students as cheap labor that we barely have to pay at all. So let's admit 3 times as many PhD students so that we can have more cheap labor to use, and then we don't have to hire as many tenured people, which means there won't be as many jobs open for all of these new grad students that we're bringing in. And this horrible cycle that's been going on now for a couple decades of more and more and more overqualified people for fewer and fewer jobs, and creating this environment where basically administrators felt like they could do anything because there were so few jobs. Faculty would take it, whatever they offered, even if it was horrible. And it's just this whole culture of exploitation that's sort of grown from that. It's terrible. Not to mention, of course, this sort of caste structure between faculty and staff as well, right? Which seems to kind of have its cultural roots back in the day when, like more than a century ago, where a university basically was a group of faculty, right? Who kind of governed themselves mostly, and they had servants, right, who did a lot of the work. And you can still, in a lot of institutions, you can still totally tell that like the sort of the cultural residue of that divide of like the faculty and their servants. It's just awful in some places. The archaic structures and modes which have like sort of survived from the 19th century, even though they're not really meaningful at all in the modern world. including a lot of like tenure procedures and stupid faculty committees and any number of other things. Of course, the increasing, especially in the last few decades, dependency of higher education institutions upon government funding, even private institutions, which usually get millions of dollars per year from their states. Not to mention, of course, the sort of hideous symbiotic relationship between the federal student loan programs and the college tuition crisis. It's been in this horrible kind of resonance cycle for decades now. It's terrible. And then, of course, the more recent trend in the last couple decades has then to shift these things by taking all that stuff as is and superimposing corporate values on top, right? And like changing things over so that we have like a president and lots of vice presidents like running things, right? Anyway, it's kind of awful. So it's the world is kind of messed up. So here I was, working to build this new university from scratch, and it's sort of slowly dawning on me as I'm doing it. Hey, we have the chance to create something special here, right? We're just hitting the reset button on this higher education thing, right? Let's get together and sort of talk about all these things that we've been complaining about for a long time, these problems that we've been seeing happen all over the place, and see how can we make this work better. How can we, all these problems about, bad leadership and the exploitation and the marginalization of people, and let's change it. Let's build a system in which that stuff doesn't happen, right? It's been really neat. It's an opportunity that I was not thinking of at the beginning. I had an inkling about the tuition thing. I wasn't really thinking about this. But especially in the last year and a half or so, as we've really kind of moved out of startup mode and begun really operating more like a professional institution, it's been really fun building these systems and trying to really create this community, which is going to be special on the inside as well as on the outside, right? Again, that initial vision, that initial goal was what the good we could do for people outside, right? Through low tuition and the new opportunities to study that we were able to provide for people. But to be able to say, no, we want this to be every bit as special on the inside. We want to be able to do right by individual people and create systems that will do right by people, hopefully for generations. That's been a really, really fun project, and that's been kind of the unanticipated perk of this whole thing. When I look back from here, when I look back to 5 years ago, the whole thing seems completely insane. I mean, totally insane. If I had thought about this then, I mean, I think I just would have said it was nuts. I mean, if I if I had said at the time, like, okay, I'm gonna establish a completely new university. I'm gonna solve the student debt problem. I'm gonna pioneer a new pedagogical method. I'm gonna totally reorganize how the university does business. And by the way, on the side, I'm gonna create a new center for Tolkien studies and build arguably the best program of its kind. I mean, the best program for fantasy and science fiction literature in the world, just as a kind of a sidelight to these other bigger things that we're trying to do. Right? I mean, I don't even know what I would have said if I had thought through then, or if I had known then what I was going to do. In fact, it sort of reminds me of another passage, actually, in the Fellowship of the Ring, of course, near the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, in the breaking of the Fellowship, Sam's analysis of Frodo at that point. But Mr. Frodo, he knows he's got to find the cracks of doom if he can, but he's afraid. Now it's come to the point he's just plain terrified. That's what his trouble is. Of course, he's had a bit of schooling, so to speak. We all have, since we left home, or he'd be so terrified that he'd just fling the ring in the river and bolt. But he's still too frightened to start, right? Fortunately, I have had a bit of schooling, or else I would have just thrown the ring in the river in Bolt. Fortunately, I'm not where I was 5 years ago. Now that I'm looking back at this and seeing how crazy this is, but of course, how have I been able to? What has enabled me, to not succumb to terror and throw the ring in the river? Um, uh, because the fact is, people have been predicting that this thing would fail all along, right? There were a bunch of people who were giving me trouble about this and who did not think that it was going to be able to stay afloat even for 1 year, right? I mean, at the beginning, I was saying, hey, so I have this great idea. I want to offer classes. I want to charge really, really low tuition, but I want to pay people above scale, right? And people were like, okay, I get it. You're an English teacher, right? Maybe you don't understand the basic business model here, but that doesn't seem like that adds up, right? And I was like, no, 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 really, actually, it works because I've always been a little bit better at math than most people assume, because I'm an English professor. I did double major in science in college. I can do math, so I was like, no, actually, I really think we'll do it, and it was it was an adventure, but we did in fact stay afloat for a year, for several years, right? Year after year, we kept going. We didn't compromise on our tuition. We didn't compromise on our faculty pay, and we continued to survive and to continued to move along. Um, uh, then there's the whole certification process, right? The certification and accreditation process. And some of you are probably wondering, what gives with that, right? It's been 5 years. How are you not done with that process? Hey, haven't you been working on that for a really long time? What's up with that? Um, by the way, this is something I'm not even supposed to talk about in public. Somewhere right now, Jen, our compliance officer, is gripping the table with a white-knuckled grip in front of her, wondering what I'm going to say. what I'm going to say. I'm going to try to be good, Jen, but I want to be honest about this because I know it's a question. Again, thinking back for 5 years, I know it's a question. There are probably people who have been following what we've been doing with interest who are sort of now wondering, if we actually really intend to go through with it, with the accreditation process. Yes, we do. And but again, that I want to talk about that a little bit. See, originally, part of this has been, it's been part of the growing process as we've been developing. Originally, when I thought about the whole process of preparing ourselves for the accreditation review, I would have told you that, and if you'd asked me about this several years ago, I would have said, well, the big challenge is basically this is just a huge project. I mean, the size. I mean, do you know how many reports we have to prepare? Do you know just the volume of paperwork that we've got to produce? This is a huge project, and it's going to take us some time to put all this stuff together. That's true and everything. I'm not saying I was wrong about that. That was certainly true. But really, the biggest challenge was something I had no idea about, and that is, in order to have ourselves prepared in order to do the thing that we have said we were going to do from the beginning, the thing that we have promised to do from the beginning, to establish ourselves, not to try to fake it and try to get by, right? Not just to try to wing it and say, basically put up a product for review by accrediting boards, which, would be a kind of a two-dimensional cardboard prop-up thing, right? And hope that they didn't peek around behind the back. We could have done that. We could have had the stuff together to submit, but it would have been a cardboard cutout that we would have been putting on. And I have not wanted to do that. I want to make sure that first and foremost we are doing what we do as well as we possibly can. That we are serving our students and supporting our students as well as we possibly can. And only when I'm satisfied that we've gotten to a place that I feel really comfortable with, are we going to present ourselves and say, okay, this is Signum University. This is what we are. There are a lot of challenges for that. And again, they're not the kind of challenges that I would have expected. The biggest challenges, I would say, there are lots of things that we're sort of systems that we're required to have that are really hard to put in place when when you're just starting out and you don't have any money. Um, uh, and there's a lot of there's a lot of things where we um, anyway it's there are a lot of ways in which, of course, by nature of the fact of the very project that we're undertaking, where we are, we find that we may be asked to fit into a mold that we're deliberately trying to break. And we need to make sure that we position ourselves carefully so that we can stand up and say, no, this is who we are. And we're proud of who we are. And we're proud of what we do. And we're not just winging it, right? We are solid and established. We are a firm foothold, right? And that's what we've been working for. And that's why it's taken a while, because it's not just about preparing the paperwork. It's about really building a system that we can be secure in and move forward with. And there was always one way out. There was always a way around, which, again, is over the years something that a bunch of people have told me I was a fool not to focus on, not to try to do. And that is to sell out, essentially. Instead of trying to establish ourselves as an independent institution, which is really hard, instead ally ourselves with another school. I think we could do that if we wanted to. There are a lot of schools out there that are struggling and would really love a successful online program, and whom I could probably approach and say, hey, look what we have, right? We are what you want, right? Let's join together. Let us be under your institutional umbrella. We'll be your online program, and then we can do our thing. And maybe, I could negotiate to let them still do our Tolkien stuff and everything. And, so we could still have our, subject matter thing. That would be the safer option. Many would say that would be the smarter option, the wiser option, because trying to do what we're doing, the system is hard to break into for a brand new institution with no funding. I mean, the assumptions, all the way along the way, we've been meeting these sort of assumptions that no one's going to try to do what we are doing. I have gotten the impression from all of the, professional institutions and services that I've spoken to along the way, that they usually look at us like, whoa, what is going on here? This is weird. And of course, weirdest still that it hasn't failed yet. It's usually the thing that I read from them between the lines. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to sell out. Yes, this would skip a lot of the problems, but we would lose the things that made us who we were in the first place. We would lose the tuition model, because there's no way we could join with a brick and mortar campus and still offer classes at the rates that we do. We'd undersell their own bottom line. It would contradict their own best interest to offer. They couldn't do it. They couldn't mix their business models in that way. We, of course, wouldn't be able to carry on with the really fun reform that we've been trying to institute, right? That would basically, have to go, because we'd have to follow their structures, and we'd be submitting ourselves into, we'd be part of their system and would have to accept their system. We don't want to do that. Not if we don't absolutely have to, and we don't. So we haven't done that because it is possible. And we have been succeeding. And 5 years later, we're still here, and we're doing better than we've ever done before. And we are more solid and more. And right now, I'm about ready. I'm about ready to say, I don't care. Anyone can look at us now and say, no, there was a time, at the beginning, when I was, a professor who didn't really know a lot about what I was doing, sitting there kind of doing everything myself from my laptop in my walk-in closet, saying, I feel like I'm kind of, making things up as I go along here, right? It's not the case anymore. We have arrived at a really exciting place. And how have we done that? How have we managed to succeed in ways that nobody ever expected we ever do? Of course, by your support, by the support of you guys, by the support of the wonderful people who have invested themselves and their time, our marvelous staff who have done such incredible things to get us to where they are, and I will have much more to say about that, but I'm going to save that for a different day. But them certainly, but also, of course, our wonderful donors. This is our fourth fundraising campaign that we're kicking off here tonight, and it has made the difference. If it hadn't been for these fundraising campaigns, we would have folded in 2013. We certainly would have. We were on the edge, but we were threatening to fall off the edge in 2013. And then our first fundraising campaign changed everything. And since then, it has enabled us to have the freedom to build, right? To continue to move forward. This is the way that most schools operate. Of course, it's normal. Of course, you guys have probably, all of you who have graduated from a university are used to probably at least once a year, you receive an appeal from your alma mater to donate to the school, right, to support them. And in these appeals, they probably tell you how small a percentage of the total costs of the university are covered by tuition, right? This is a pretty standard kind of thing, a standard story you're probably used to hearing. And it's that didn't used to be able to be true before we did our first fundraising campaign. We just threw our tuition, which was, again, deliberately very low, right? We just had to find ways to make things work as well as we can. Now we're able to do more because we have yours and have had your support, your wonderful support for 3 years now into this fourth year. And what we've been able to build in these last few years, not just survive, but move forward, has been really great. Luke, very good. Luke thinking of another Fellowship of the Ring passage that perhaps, sometimes you just have to trust to great friendship rather than wisdom. Exactly, Luke. Yeah. The Signum experience has definitely vindicated Gandalf's words to Elrond. Of course, as Gandalf so smugly points out several times later on in The Lord of the Rings, but exactly. So this place where we are now, we've turned a really important corner in this past year. You've probably, if you, and I know many of you attended my State of the University address a couple months ago where I talked about our new academic program and the way things have changed. We've really built a foundation for the future. And this semester, the fall semester, which is our first semester, and our new program with our expanded course offerings and our concentrations and our regular rotation of classes in order to build a really cohesive and coherent academic program for people to be working in and moving forward with. We have the highest enrollment. We had we completely blew out of the water our previous application record of people who are applying. And by the way, almost everybody who applies to Signum University comes. It's like a given with us. It's always been our experience. Anyway, so we have. We had more interest, more new students in our program than ever. We have the highest credit enrollment, of MA students and concentration and certificate students than we've ever had in any given semester. It's been just this wonderful foundation to build on as we continue to move forward and build our academic program. We've been beginning in this semester our new emphasis on Signum community. Really, we've always had a good online community, especially the kind of camaraderie that's always grown around first my podcast and then around the Mythgard stuff. It still is around the Mythgard stuff. But just again, even in our program itself, we have our new advising program where we're really, hoping to make people feel more a part of our program, more like they're not just taking classes at Signum. They really belong here. They really are Signum students. Our new online area with our new community area, which we call the Community Hearth, where we're inviting our students to come together and get to know each other better and discuss things for fun. I'll say a little bit more about that in a little bit. We've also another really neat thing that has recently happened is sort of evidence of the impact of our reputation kind of spreading out a little bit. I had a wonderful experience this past summer, just a couple months ago, where I was invited to come and be a consultant. I went and visited Johnson C. Smith University down in Charlotte. They've got a wonderful new online program. They're building online programs down there, and one of their faculty knew me from my podcast and has been following Signum for a while, and he recommended me to their council of deans, and they invited me to come in as a consultant and take a look at their program and talk with their staff and their faculty and their deans, the university president. Talking with them, telling them about the Signum method and what we've done through Signum and how they can sort of take the things that we've learned and seen and been trying out for 5 years at Signum, and how they can, maybe make that work at their own school and develop a really innovative online program there. It's really neat. It was really fun, but it was one of the first times ever that somebody from the academy, from the established institute. Johnson C. Smith University is a wonderful school with a great culture and a wonderful history. They were, in fact, as I went down there, they had big banners up and everything. They're celebrating their 150th anniversary, right? And it was there were times when I was kind of pinching myself, and I'm like, here we are, Signum University, and we've come down here to help them, right, to give them advice, because we're the experienced ones when it comes to online education, because we've been doing this. Yes, and Sharon Hoff is teasing me, and I wore a suit on campus. It was funny, but anyway, it was great. We're really, we're also, we're moving into really exciting times at Signum, at times when I hope that more people are going to begin to recognize. I mean, again, I sort of joked around about how in 2011 I kind of felt like raising my hand and saying, like, actually, I have an idea about the student debt. Nobody's going to listen to me at that point. First of all, I really barely had anything more than an idea at that point. Now Signum is a proof of concept. Now we have 5 years. And now I am much more interested in raising my hand and telling that story to other people. And I'm going to be really interested to see where that's going to be going over the course of this next year. Are there, other schools that we can be talking to? Are there, other people because I think there may be, journalists and people who might be interested in hearing the Signum story and hearing where we've come from and what we're doing. So we'll see what comes of that. But as I say, it's really, really exciting times. I've talked for a long time about all this stuff, but I wanted to share the story to make sure that you guys all knew the story, to understand how big a thing you guys are a part of, right? Because you're part of something that's not just fun. It is fun, but it's not just fun. It's really, really a big thing. Well, let me get to actually talking about this month and what we're doing, because this is our big celebration of who we are and what we do, right? One of the first things I wanted to draw your attention to, one of the sort of changes, and it's more of a philosophical change, really, is what we're going to be. As you know, this is our 4th campaign. In the past, we've had a donor appreciation system in place. When we started in the very first year, our campaign was done very much in the the Kickstarter model. We used Indiegogo, and it was very much if you donate this much money, then we'll give you this stuff in exchange, right? And that was cool. That was fun. It's been kind of the way that we've been operating. Signum is in a different place now, and as such, I want to sort of treat things differently. It's not just about like if you donate, you'll get a thing. Instead, if you give to Signum University, you will be a part of the Signum community, and that's really what I want to emphasize, and that's really what I've tried to emphasize in the way that we have mapped out our donor appreciation program this year. I want to go through that with you. I encourage you to go to our website. I'm actually not going to stream it. I'm not going to show it. I want you to go to the website yourself, because I want you to see it. I want you to be able to sort of explore around. Go to signumuniversity.org. click on the donate the word donate on the far right, and this will take you to information about our annual fund. So on our annual fund page, which is also signumuniversity.org/fund, and you will see, if you scroll down towards the bottom of that page, our donor appreciation program and the different sort of circles that we have. Let me just explain some of the terms here to explain what this means. Again, the first and main thing, if you donate to Signum University, you will be welcome to be a part of our community. You'll get a login to our community hearth, where you can be a part of our discussions, to sort of hang out and meet our students and the rest of our community. There are a bunch of sort of special areas where you can come in to sort of engage in different discussions. You can get access to our classroom archives. This is a shift, and again, this is just another shift in policy, which sort of reflects the different place where Signum is compared to where it used to be. Back in the old days, by which I mean last week, we used to sell course packs, right? So if you wanted to get access to a course that we offered in the past, right, but are not offering right now, you could purchase a course pack, right? We're not selling course packs anymore. It's very similar to what we did before, but we want to contextualize that differently, because we think about it differently, and we want people to sort of get the Signum community as we're showing it. So instead of just buying a course pack as if you're just shopping in an online store, you make a $100 donation to Signum, and you'll get access to one of our classroom archives, which are basically, it's the same thing as our course packs. You'll be able to get access to one of our old courses, and as you can see, if you scroll down, there are at different levels of giving, you get more course packs, and that's every year at those levels. By the way, they would be renewed annually. So long as your giving is renewed. So that's again, it's just a different way of thinking about an old thing. There's the Mythgard Academy area, which of course has been something I know many of you have been engaged in. Voting rights in Mythgard Academy classes is still something that you get, again, as part of that community. The people who donate $100 and above get to be members of the Council of the Wise, the nominating council for the Mythgard Academy class, and to be involved in those discussions. We have a special area for people, because a lot of people want to carry on doing more asynchronous discussion of Mythgard Academy classes. It's been a request we've often received. Like, can we get together to talk about this stuff ourselves in between classes, outside of the main class trajectory? Yeah, we wanted to do that. We wanted to facilitate that. So we have a place in our community hearth that enables people to do that. And again, our donors will be welcomed. Will be welcomed in there. Another thing that we added this past year that your donations last year enabled us to do is to have library resources for our students. We never had that. We never had any library resources. It was so sad. But now we have a subscription to a great set of online journals, including Tolkien Studies, which everybody was really excited about. And so some of our donors, again, will be, it's one of the sort of the tiers on the donor reward. The donor appreciation program is going to be access to our library as well. So anyway, there's lots of really fun things. I encourage you to look through that, and just for you to know that what it means to be a donor at Signum University means we're going to welcome you as a part of our institution, right? It's a part of who we are and what we're doing, and we want you to feel that you are welcomed in that way. Well, as far as what's coming up this month, in this campaign is going to be a month-long celebration of the stuff that we do, and let me kind of go through that. Now, if you've got your web browser up there and you're looking at the Signum University page, if you hover over that donate menu on the far right-hand side there, and go down to the fall campaign page, you can see there a convenient list of events. If you scroll down over there on the right-hand side, you can look at all the events. That'll take you to different pages where you can find the registration links and all the information that you'll need for that stuff. And let me just kind of walk you through a little bit about what we're doing, because I'm really excited for a bunch of these events. We have several special events associated with all of the special programs we have. It's one of the things, of course, that we've been enabled to do over the last few years, thanks to your generosity. We've been able to build a whole bunch, to build and financially support a bunch of free open programs. Of course, it costs quite a bit to film, to record, process, host, and make available, store and host for download all the files that we have and all the material that we've accumulated. But we're committed to doing that, and we've been expanding that over the last couple of years. Mythgard Academy, of course, is the longest standing of these, going to be entering its 4th year this year, which I'm super excited to see where we're going. I have been having so much fun, both with our History of Middle-earth progression that we've been going through. That has been such an illuminating thing for me. And it's just, I have been so enriched by that study, and just the wonderful fun of the other non-Tolkien books that we do in between. We just started Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed last night, which is really great. Anyway, I'm going to do 2 special one-off Mythgard Academy sessions, 2 bonus Mythgard Academy sessions on things that were nominated by our nominating council. The first one is coming up very soon, as you can see if you scroll just down to the second item on the list after tonight, on the campaign events, and that is Nightfall by Isaac Asimov. It's a short story by Asimov. It's only 20 pages long, so you have time to read it between now and next Thursday. And so we're going to talk about that next Thursday night. It'll just be one class on that Asimov story. We've never done any Golden Age science fiction in the Mythgard Academy, so I'm really looking forward to that. We're also going to do, as usual, if you scroll down to the very bottom of the list, you see there's the webathon. That's been traditional now. Every time we've done one of these fundraising campaigns, to have our big webathon at the end of the campaign. And we're planning a really fun webathon this year. I'm going to do another Mythgard Academy session, another bonus session during the webathon. And I can already tell you what I'm going to do it on too. I never would have thought of this. In fact, it's something I didn't know. I'd never seen. But one of our nominators suggested that new Netflix series, Stranger Things, which is awesome. I just watched the first 2 episodes of that, and I've decided we're totally doing that. So we're going to do a session on Stranger Things in the webathon. It's going to be. I'm really. I haven't even finished watching it yet. I'm already really excited about that. So we're going to do fun, extra Mythgard Academy sessions in addition to the regular Mythgard Academy sessions that are continuing on. We're going to do a couple sort of Tolkien Professor podcast specials. Of course, the primary Tolkien Professor podcast thing that is still going on now in our 10th year in the podcast is the Silmarillion Film Project, of course. And the Film Project is now in the middle of its 2nd year. It's its 2nd season, planning season 2 of the Silmarillion Film Project, and it has been awesome. That has been so engaging. I've been so excited to see different people getting involved and contributing in lots of different ways. So 2 things we're going to do for the Film Project during this week. The first, if you see, it's up. Like the 3rd thing, I think, 4th thing maybe on the list, a film discussion we're going to have with Ted Naismith, the Tolkien artist, the wonderful painter who worked with Christopher Tolkien to make the illustrated Silmarillion. We're going to sit down and have a talk with him about visual adaptation of the Silmarillion. We're going to talk about some of the stuff we've been discussing in the Silmarillion Film Project, and kind of get his take and hear about his own process and sort of visually imagining the Silmarillion. It's going to be a great event. And then at the end in the webathon, we're going to have a script writing session. We have a bunch of volunteers who have taken it upon themselves to do full outlines of the screenplay for each of our film episodes that we plan, and we're going to bring them in, and we're going to have a special session working together to to work this out, so everybody can kind of really dig into the creative process there. I'm really looking forward to connecting with them. We're doing a whole bunch of Lotro events. This is something that was really last year's campaign was really the first time we were sort of celebrating what was then still quite a new thing that Mythgard had started to do, reaching out within the online gaming community and especially to the Lord of the Rings Online community. And that's something that has really blossomed even more over this last year, and a community that I have loved connecting with, as well as just a project that I find myself continually impressed by, just as an adaptation project. So a couple different things we're going to be doing there. One, I'm going to be having a discussion with the senior content producer at Turbine, the company that produces The Lord of the Rings Online. His screen name is Made of Lions. His real name is Jeff Libby, and he and I are going to sit down. He's the one who wrote the Epic Quest stories. So for those of you who have played the game, he's the one who basically has done the planning and writing of the storylines in the game. So he and I are going to sit down and we're going to talk about the story and the adaptation and the relationship with Tolkien's stories, and what that whole experience has been like for him, and how he does that. And we'll kind of discuss the relationship with Tolkien's world and everything. He's one person down in Turbine I've never been able to sit down with yet, and I've been really looking forward to having that conversation. Then this is sort of a Lotro tradition. I'm going to do a marathon stream session. So as many of you know, Sharon is asking if I'm going to offer to rewrite Tom Bombadil's lines. Yeah, I'm totally going to offer to rewrite Tom Bombadil's lines. It's the really the biggest criticism I have of the writing of the stories in Lotro is that Tom Bombadil doesn't speak in quite the right meter. I can't handle it. So we're gonna see if we can work on that. But anyway, in sort of Lotro tradition, we're gonna have a marathon stream. Many of you know I've been streaming the game. I've been doing a weekly session where I've been kind of going through the storyline of the game and exploring the world and admiring the architecture and talking about both the sort of the world building that they do within Tolkien's subcreation there and its relationship to Tolkien's subcreation, as well as thinking about the links to the story and often the very, very clever ways in which they bring those things together. I'm going to do a marathon session. I've set this enormous challenge for myself where I'm going to try to get my little hobbit burglar, Grifflet, all the way from the west gate of Moria to the Dimrill Dale in one day. I'm going to try to do this in one sitting, where I go through all the quest line through the entire long dark of Moria from one end to the next. We'll see if I can get that done in one day. It's going to take me a long time if I can manage it, but we'll see what we can do. So that's going to be on October 1st. Where I'm going to be making a special fundraising appeal during that marathon. We're going to try to raise. Last year during the campaign we raised $7,000. I told the Lotro folks, the Lotro supporters, that if we raised $7,000 within the campaign that was specially dedicated to the Lotro appeal, I would do a chicken run, which we did. Some of you might have seen that last year, where this really kind of bizarre thing they do in Lotro, where you can turn yourself into a chicken, and then walk in chicken form all the way across Middle-earth. And we walked all the way from Nickel Delving in the Shire to Minas Tirith, and jumped off we Denethor'd off the end of the prow of Minas Tirith at the end. Big finish of our chicken run. And anyway, so we did that last year. We hit our $7,000 goal, which was great. So this year I have a $5,000 goal, and if we make the $5,000 goal during or by the time of the Grifflet marathon, then I'm going to do a second marathon with Wigand, my other character, who is just about to enter into Rohan. So I'll take him, and he's going to get to learn how to ride a war steed and begin to explore Rohan and the really interesting story, which I've never, and this will be something I've never done before at all. So I'll be sort of discovering Rohan for the first time on that marathon stream, assuming we we achieve our goal. So that one will come later on. We have tentatively scheduled that, for Saturday the 22nd here. During the webathon, we're going to have another. Oh yes, Tom. Of course, Tom is reminding me about the alliterative poem that two of our supporters composed about the chicken run. Yeah, that was good. Tom, have we ever published that somewhere? That totally has to be somewhere. We need to make sure we enshrine the alliterative celebration of the chicken run last year, because that was awesome. You're absolutely right to remind me of that. We're going to do another session with so one of our partner, one of sort of our on in-game friends and allies, including, of course, some of our own students and supporters. Anyway, with a weekly Twitch program called the Girls of Middle Earth, and they're gonna have me as a guest on their episode that day. My character is gonna get a makeover. I'm not even sure everything that's going to happen to him in that episode, but it's going to be really fun. So I hope you'll enjoy this sort of view of this other side of Lotro culture. It's not all about running around and killing things. Anyway, it's going to be fun. Oh, so Tom, Curtis Wayant says get him the poem and he'll post it. So send it to curtis.wayant@signumu.org, and he can make it happen. So lots of really fun Lotro stuff happening this month. And for our students, for those of you who are a little bit more wanting something a little bit meatier, we have meatier things too. Of course, there's much meat in our Lotro things, as well as in the film, and as well as in the Mythgard Academy. But we've got some other things too. We want to celebrate some of our wonderful students. We just had an event a couple weeks ago where two of our students, Dan Kinney and Aaron Masters, were talking with one of our faculty, Sarah Brown, about their theses. They're two, they've just been finishing their thesis, and in Signum, their master's theses. And they were talking about their own work and their own projects. We're going to have another couple of those. So you'll be able to hear from Chris Swank on October 7th. Again, that's also on the schedule. You'll see it's the thesis chat listed for Friday, October 7th. And she'll be talking about the research that she did. Chris is one of our, she was our very first graduate who's now in a PhD program, and is teaching on the Signum faculty now. She's been a preceptor with us for several semesters. It's been, so you get to hear about the work that she did. And remember, I just love listening to these stories. And I just would want to encourage people, especially those of you who have been supporters but have never been students with us yet, who have never really taken our classes. These are people who were wonderful, highly intelligent and well-educated people, but who had, were not really in the scholarly circle, before they joined us, and since taking classes with us at Signum, they've been, they've been published. They've been, presenting papers at scholarly conferences, and now they're graduating and writing theses and teaching now. It's been really, really awesome to see. And the other thing I've sort of best for last, the biggest thing that's happening this month is the new thing. Again, if you heard the State of the University address, you heard me talking about this before. It's our new seminar series. And let me pause for a second to give a little bit of to remind you of the background of that. I mentioned before the change to our academic program, how we're now offering more classes more regularly, and we have this regular schedule so that people can complete their concentrations and really plan their programs. And it is really strengthened our master's degree program as a program, and it's been really a revolution in our academic existence here. But it came at a cost, and the cost in two directions, really. One is the cost to our the primary issue is our auditors, of course. From the very beginning, from the very first semester, we've always had a lot of students, dozens of students, sometimes over 100 students every term, who used to audit our classes, who couldn't or didn't need to take our classes for credit, but still really wanted to be involved, loved the content, really wanted to be able to attend the lectures either live or to be able to get them soon afterwards and follow along, just loved the content, even if they weren't involved in our program. Our auditors have really been, at the heart of our supporters and our most faithful students in many cases for a really long time. And one of the consequences, of course, to making the shift in our program is that we have fewer new classes. Right? It used to be every semester we'd have almost all of our classes would be new classes. We rarely repeated classes at all. So every semester was like this new smorgasbord of new classes for our auditors to choose among. And now that's not the case anymore. And it's a choice that we had to make. We really needed to do this for the sake of our master's degree program and to put it on a firm footing. But the consequence is that there just aren't as many options anymore for people who want it. But I don't want to stop serving those people. I don't want to cut those people off. Right? If you've been an auditor with us, I want you to be able to continue to get the kind of in-depth stuff that you've been able to get with us for a long time. So I decided to create a new program, which would be open to everybody, but which would be hoping to at least to some extent fill that niche a little bit, and that's our seminar series. So what we're doing this first year with our seminar series, we're going to be doing a series of seminars, and what the seminars are, they're multi-part, right? So it's kind of like a mini Mythgard Academy class, or it's going to be sessions once per week, usually for anywhere between like 2 to 4 weeks. I think they'll vary. Probably most of them will be 3 sessions, but there may be some variation. Anyway, so they'll be, so they'll meet for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, once a week. And it'll be like a 60 to 90-minute session with wonderful, distinguished guest lecturers, the faculty that you auditors have always loved coming and hearing from in our classes. And the series, the theme of the series that I decided on for this year is what I call Tolkien's new books. All those books that Christopher Tolkien's been putting out over the last, or sort of releasing. He's not edited all of them, of course, but he's been releasing and permitting to be printed, right? And there's been a lot of stuff and a lot of really, really new things. But I think that a lot of Tolkien readers, a lot of Tolkien fans, are not always sort of quite sure what to do with it, right? What is this thing that we're reading, right? Like The Fall of Arthur, Sigurd and Gudrun, or the Beowulf book that came out, or things like that. So what are these things? That's what this seminar series is going to be about. So I'm bringing in the first one that we're going to do one here during this month-long campaign, and that's going to be a 3-week session on A Secret Vice. So I have my copy right here of A Secret Vice, just very recently released, edited by Dr. Andrew Higgins and Dimitri Fimi. I call Andrew Higgins Dr. Andrew Higgins as often as I can because I'm still celebrating with him his completion of his PhD, which he did on the side while doing his extremely demanding day job. Andrew has been an auditor with Mythgard from the very first semester. He audited our very first class and has been an enthusiastic part of our community ever since. He's now a member of the board of directors of Signum University, and it's been wonderful to sort of be connected with him and watch his own scholarly career just sort of blossoming over the last 5 years. It's been amazing. Anyway, so Dr. Higgins and Dr. Feeney edited this book, A Secret Vice. You may know the essay, A Secret Vice, in one of Tolkien's famous essays, which you can find in the volume, The Monsters and the Critics, and it's about language creation. It's about invented languages, and this book has a bunch of new things. They made a bunch of discoveries which were never known before. But again, I know that this material is not something that's always, equally sort of transparent to everybody. So this this month, we're going to bring in Dr. Higgins and Dr. Feeney, and they're going to lead us through some of the really cool stuff that they discovered in doing the secret advice. So those sessions, again, you can see them on our campaign page there. They're going to start on Tuesday, October 11th, and they'll meet for 3 weeks, so October 11th, October 18th, and October 25th for the last 3 Tuesdays of October. And they will be talking to us on the secret advice. I hope that you will be able to join us. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about that as well is that we're also doing a special fundraising appeal for the seminar series, because I mentioned that there's a cost to the alteration that we made in our academic program, and of course the primary cost that I was emphasizing was the cost to our auditors, that there are so many fewer options now available for them, and how we're trying to sort of fill that hole with our seminar series. But of course, it also came at a cost to Signum as well. As I said, we used to get like 100 auditors a term at times, and that's a lot of tuition income that Signum doesn't have now. Of course, we have fewer auditors, we have fewer chances now for auditors, and that's income that tuition income that we need to make up in order to be able to make ends meet. So what we're going to ask, the seminar series is going to be open. It's going to run just like the Mythgard Academy. You'll be able to register for free. We're not going to charge for tickets or anything like that. We're not going to charge for downloads. You're not going to have to pay to get access to it. It will be open to everybody, and it will be available as a free download to everybody. But of course, it is something we are, of course, paying honoraria to our special guests. Would really appreciate people who want to participate in that. If you would, we're going to have a suggested donation of $20 if you want to participate. Again, it's not required, but suggested. It would really help us if we could do that. And I have a really exciting thing to tell. We got I was extremely moved by the generosity of this gift. Received a wonderful gift from an anonymous donor who gave us the gift of a full. Our goal, our target to raise for these seminars is $2,500 a piece. So we're hoping to raise $2,500 towards the Secret Advice seminar, but an anonymous donor has already made a $2,500 donation as matching funds for this first seminar. So if we hit our target of $2,500, then we'll actually be able to double that, and we'll have $5,000 for Signum if we do succeed in hitting that $2,500 target. So I hope that you'll consider you'll consider giving for that. If you go again on the campaign page on our site there, if you click on the Secret Advice seminar, it will bring you to the event page, and from there we should have do we have there, this is all brand new even to me. We have our registration. So let's see, Curtis, tell me where I can find the link for the donations. So they might not be up yet. This is something we've been fixing up at the last minute. Okay, the Secret Advice seminar page. Okay. Good. All right. Excellent. Good. So anyway, I hope that you will consider giving to support that, and if you like, also the Grifflet Marathon, the Lotro event. So they're special. If you're wanting to give to support those particular events, we have separate donation forms, which you'll be able to see linked to, so we can kind of keep track of, if you want your donation to support a particular program, that we can it all goes to support Signum and all the stuff that we do. But that's just a way that we will be able to kind of keep track of the programs that you guys are really excited to support. Well, that's all I had that I wanted to tell you about. As you can see, there are lots of things going on. There's at least two 2 or 3 special events every week for the next 5.5 weeks. So I hope that you will be able to join us these, and that you will participate with us in celebrating Signum. I hope that you will continue to donate and to support Signum as we continue our work moving forward. Does anybody have any questions or anything before I end here tonight? Wanted to make sure to give you a chance to ask questions if you have questions. Really appreciate everybody coming out here tonight, and I look forward to an exciting campaign this year. I'll be back to, of course, you'll be hearing from me with updates about the campaign and other things going on throughout the month. Rachel, great question. Yes, the events will be recorded. Recording should be available for, I think, everything that's going on during the campaign. Yeah. And the best place, sort of central place to find all those things is YouTube. We've been posting all of our video recordings to YouTube, and you'll be able to find the recordings of everything that's going on there, including the Lotro marathons if you wanna take in all like 8 or 9 hours or however long it's going to take me to get all the way through Moria. You'll totally be able to do that. But anyway, yeah. So that, I think the chicken run from last year is still on YouTube, as I recall. But anyway, yeah. So those will definitely be available. Great. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody, again for joining me, and thanks as always. Thanks more and more for being a supporter of Signum University.